Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay, a podcast focusing on meditation, the near death experience, and all things spiritual. Hello, this is Jay Spillers with Inspire Me with Jay. My guest today is Joel Corral. How are you doing today, Joel?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
So, why don't you tell us about your story and what you've experienced?
So, as a child, my father was in the military and we traveled. I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, and we quickly moved to Virginia. From Virginia, when I was 4, we moved to Europe. And within that time living in Belgium, I began feeling ominous feelings walking past a graveyard towards our bus stop, which Germany was just up the hill from our home in Holland. And within that time frame, I started seeing spirits that other kids and other family members weren't seeing, and I was also tormented by an evil being in our home 16 hours before my best friend Michael passed away. And Michael was the only one that I was going to speak to about what I've been dealing with and what I saw earlier in that morning with that demonic presence in our home. And when he got off of the bus, I waved to him because he was my best bud, and he died a few hours later in his front yard. And at that point in my life, being a 7-year-old, being tormented by dark beings or a dark present or having something attached to me, and then having my best friend die during the same season, it really had me questioning what was going on in life and how, you know, everything that I was learning and taking in like a sponge, listening and hearing about a God and hearing about all these terrorist attacks in Belgium and Brussels when I was living there, and us being pulled away from our classrooms at absent because the Turkish embassy got bombed and the Turkish ambassador got assassinated. I was just full of questions as a child, and I really didn't know how to deal with all of these things being so young. We ended up moving back to America in 1987, going back to Phoenix for 3 years. And this is when I was getting bullied a lot because I'm a small guy, really teeny. And, when I got bullied, I got asked, kind of peer pressured into fighting this kid. And I didn't want to fight, but I also didn't want to be considered a chicken. So I fought this kid after school. And when I missed the kick, I tried to do the Karate Kid kick, Daniel LaRusso, the crane kick, and I missed. Everybody laughed at me. It's about 60 students outside of school that were laughing at me. And when that happened, I blacked out. And to this day, I still don't remember. But I ended up almost killing this kid without acknowledging what happened. And then the same thing the day after the school the next day when I got bullied by his friends when they were calling me crazy. I ended up punching through a window in a home and pulling the kid out, and I lost all consciousness, and that continues to happen to me today at almost 44 years old. So that's almost 34 years of rage, and also feeling like something's been attached to me since I was a child. So we ended up moving back to Virginia. My father was stationed at the Pentagon, and I played sports for a while, and I love sports, but I never grew. And that really hurt my feelings, and super depressed and super anxious. And I kept having to move schools, and that depressed me a lot. So I gave up on sports and I started to steal my parents' alcohol at 14 years old. And I started drinking and smoking my mom's cigarettes that were in the ashtray. And that led down a 19-year battle with alcohol, crack cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, acid, spray paint. formaldehyde, which is embalming fluid, and I started using these substances. And for up until 2013, so you're talking from 1994 to 2013, I started doing things that were unnatural for me as a young man, and started associating with people that were doing evil things. And there was a lot of death around me specifically. And as far as me having near death experiences, because I became gang affiliated, I ended up in 1998 having a stroke when somebody hit me in the head with a police smack light at a club in Virginia, about midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning. And my father always said, if you're out there at night and you don't have a job, you have no business being out there, and bad things happen to those that are just out there at night. And I ended up getting hit in the head with a 17-inch police smack light from another gang member who was simply trying to break the flashlight against the wall. But I ended up getting hit in the left side of my skull, and it broke my skull and it gave me a stroke, and I couldn't move. I heard everybody yelling because there was gunshots outside of the club and people were fighting inside the club. And I just laid there in a pool of blood, and people were screaming my name. They thought I'd got shot because there was shooting going on, and I couldn't move. I laid there limp. I could hear people, but I couldn't move. I didn't know my name. I didn't know my social security number when emergency responders arrived. And that led me down a really bad path. The hospital didn't do any neurological treatment. There was a lot of gang members in the hospital in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and they wanted everybody out of the lobby in the hospital. So all they did was they shaved my long hair and they put my skin back together, and they sent me on my way without ever giving me a CAT scan or MRI. And after that, I never wanted to go back to a hospital again because they didn't help me. And I didn't know professionally that I'd had a stroke for 10 years until I got in a car accident in Tucson, Arizona. And I went to a neurologist, and he said that I'd had a stroke in the past. And it totally made sense because I stuttered for a long time. And I really, really had to change the way I lived as far as crime and violence. But that's when I truly, truly started self medicating with harder drugs because of the pain, especially in the wintertime in Virginia when it really hurt my bones in my head. And to this day, I mean, this happened in 1998 and it's 2022. And if I get too stressed out because of the chemical imbalance and my mental illness, and I get too amped up, my brain still hurts in that side on the left side.
Have you ever wondered whether the Bible was compatible with a near death experience? In my book, Heaven's Truth, the parallels between the Bible and the near death experience, your faith will be strengthened while you support this channel. In Heaven's Truth, you will learn about near death experiences and other similar experiences in the Bible. Support for the Bible contained in NDEs, a central theme that runs through both the Bible and NDEs, how the NDE brings the Bible to life for these modern times, evidence for both the Bible and the NDE, and much more. Great book. Spillers does an excellent job weaving the relationship between NDEs and the scriptures. 5 stars on Amazon, available on Amazon.
I had also been kidnapped in 2002 when I was addicted to crack cocaine outside of Manassas, Virginia. And these men were drug dealers and they wanted their money. And the woman that I was sleeping with at the time owed these men money. We were all sitting around a trailer in the woods in Nokesville, Virginia, and I was trying to call her, and I knew she'd pay him because she had a job and she had a home, and I was homeless, and she really liked me a lot, and I was much younger than she was, and you're talking about 5 years after I'd already had the stroke. I'm self-medicating still and drinking a lot. A lot of things happened in my life where I had a lot of resentments that I didn't know how to deal with. So I kind of hid from everybody, including my mother, father, sister, my daughter, her mom. And I wanted to hide from everybody I grew up with. So I found a family, went out there, and I became addicted to the crack. And these men, when my friend didn't answer the phone for her money on a Friday evening, one of the men walked behind me when I was sitting on a cinder block, and he hit me from behind. I defecated in my pants, and he hit me exactly where I had had a stroke. And I landed on the dirt, and he picked up the cinder block and he started beating me with it. I was trying to get away my defense mechanisms, and I'm really small, so I was trying to flee and run to a trailer up the hill where my friend was living. And his cousin opened the back door of his truck, and my little behind like kind of squirmished, and I got away. And then as soon as I tried to make a run for it, he put the gun to my forehead and he told me to get in the truck or he was going to shoot me in the head right then and there. So I got in the truck, and I apologized to the men for smelling the way I smelled, and they'd broken my ribs. I was delirious from the man hitting me, where I'd already had the soft spot on my head from the stroke. And they drove off the dirt road onto a new dirt road, and then to there was no road. And that's when I just began crying. And I'm a very spiritual young man. I have that sixth sense where I can feel energy in a room. I can feel evil manifesting within myself and within others. And I just looked out of the back window of the truck and I looked at the moon through the trees and started crying, and I started asking God for forgiveness for my sins. But at the same time, there was no there, that wasn't possible at that point in my life. There's just too much going on, and I at that point I wasn't able to dissect it, break it down, and pull one thing, one important situation or loved one that I wanted to focus on at that time to think about right before I was going to be killed. And the phone rang, and the driver, these are two 50-year-old men from Maryland, these drug dealers, and I was early 20s. And the phone rang, and it was my lady friend, and he hung up, and the guy sitting next to me with the gun said, "Hey, who is that?" And he said, "That was her. She's got the money. She's over here." And the man in the back seat laughed, and he said, "You must be blessed, because 100 feet from now, we were, we weren't gonna have a phone reception, and that would have been that." So they turned around and they took me to a house where people were using drugs. I took my clothes off. I washed myself, threw my underwear away, and the disease of addiction, the insanity of it is that mentally healthy people may have been scared enough to walk away from that. And 15 minutes later, I decided to get high on crack cocaine again. Another situation where I almost passed away was in Washington, D.C. at another club. And a bunch of guys that I was growing up with got into a fight in front of the stage, and a bunch of gangs converged. And I felt the evil manifesting, and I saw it when it was happening, and I knew it was going to happen. And I'm so small, when I try to go warn my buddies, I just got pushed to the ground. And when everything broke up and everybody went outside the one exit back into the streets of Washington, D.C., and we were from Virginia, it was set up perfectly for these gangs in Washington, D.C., and they knew exactly how to surround us. And I small as I was, and still dealing with the stroke and everything that's been going on with me spiritually, trying to find my buddies, and they were gone except for one of my guys, and he ended up screaming my name, and I turned around and somebody punched me against a chain link fence. My friend ran to go get other people instead of helping me, and people started jumping the chain link fence, and two cars pulled up and they all got out and they started beating me. These are talking about grown men, and I'm a little teeny fella, man, and they beat me for about a good 90 seconds. And I got hit in the forehead. When I thought somebody was going to help me, for a split second, I thought a new group of guys was coming up to help me, and it ended up just being the same gang. And this guy hit me in my forehead, and I saw light. And that's when I just dropped to the ground. And when that happened, I heard people getting back in the cars, and they drove off, and everybody ran. I don't know if at that point they thought that they had beat me to death. In the meantime, the police were there. They didn't do anything about it because that was the streets that they worked, and they had deals out there with the gangs. I also had another occurrence in Tucson, Arizona, where I had been drinking with my neighbors. At this point, I was married without my four sons with my wife, and I promised her I wouldn't be drinking like always. And I always tried to drink moderately, or change to beer, or I'd only drink on the weekends. And at this point, something happened in my life to where I was super paranoid because somebody broke into our beautiful home. And I have a lot of relatives here, and I asked a relative for some methamphetamine, just a little bit to keep me awake because I didn't know who broke into our home and have a lot of trauma. So I did a little bit of meth at home, and I walked to our neighbor's house, and we played pool. And this is an older couple, and her son and his girlfriend. And she said, "You promise we got stuff to do in the morning?" And I said, "I got this. I could take it under control, especially using meth. I can drink like a fish." And I ended up drinking over there from 4 p.m. to 9 a.m. And because I was using methamphetamine, I was able to continue drinking without being drunk. What happened was I got alcohol poisoning, and my wife ended up coming over and yelling at me and kind of rattling my world and calling me out in front of people at 9 in the morning. And I went back to the house and I raged out. I started breaking everything in the house. And at that point, I just dropped, and she was able to undress me and get me in the bathtub. And while I was laying there, she was calling my parents, who at that point were alcoholics as well, and she was trying to get them to come help me for an intervention. I felt my spirit leaving my body while I was naked in the bathtub, and I was looking down at myself. I had drinking so much alcohol, and I didn't feel like I was drunk at all. I was having casual conversations for 17 hours with my neighbors. And I felt like I was dealing with it well because I had methamphetamine in my system. And I also, at another occasion, got in another car accident in 2008 here in Tucson. And the lady was doing a U-turn. I was going 50 miles an hour through an intersection, and I T-boned her, knocked her in like 80 feet into a bus stop, her car. And I hit my face on the steering wheel, the bench on my 1998 or 1988 Toyota. There was one little bench in there, and the impact was so hard that my bench unlocked itself, and I smashed my face against the little thin steering wheel, and it ended up on the same side of my face where I already had a stroke, and I've had a lot of head trauma on that side. That's when I ended up going to the neurologist and having a post concussion syndrome for about a year. And again, I didn't trust hospitals, so I started using a lot of alcohol and a lot of methamphetamine. to numb it. So besides those like impactful, like physical near death experiences, spiritually, I was going to commit suicide in 2013, suicide by cop with a machete when I was on meth. I was in and out of mental institutions. I was in and out of county jail. Uh, Methamphetamine is a portal to hell. I've never been to hell. I'm grateful for that, but I've definitely been to the gates. And I've been tormented for many years. And even today, 9 years clean and sober, I always feel like there's an attachment there. But just sitting in these mental hospitals on suicide watch where I'm naked in this room, you get a lot of time to think. And I was able to sit down and just think about my past and God and Satan and life and people and loved ones and people I despised. And, I decided to give this life thing one more shot before I was going to commit suicide. And I entered a mental hospital in 2013, and I didn't know whether I was 107 pounds at 34 years old. They'd already released me from the mental hospital multiple times, and I was contemplating jumping in front of a truck or a moving car in front of the hospital. And I paced for 2 hours contemplating that. But when they released me from there on February 8th, 2013, I said, you know what, I'm gonna try this, all these medications, I'm gonna get my head looked at. And I went to an all men's structured rehab, and I got clean and I got spiritually fit. And I spent the last 6 years writing my life's testimony, which just got published, and been having book signings at Barnes and Noble, the University of Arizona in Tucson. I just had a book signing there at the Tucson Festival of Books, which is a huge deal here. Over 100,000 people over that weekend. And I work with people with near death experiences, people that have been incarcerated, tormented by demons, children that have attempted suicide, children that have homicidal thoughts. And I'm an advocate today, and I'm also becoming a life coach to get people to the next level. I have 5 kids today. My daughter that I had in 1999 is in Virginia. She's a grown woman now. I've been able to meet her. I wrote the book so she can read it if she wishes to understand that I wasn't just a deadbeat dad, but I had a lot of trauma there that I wasn't willing to face. And I introduced her to her 4 brothers that are here in Tucson, Arizona. And, I'm doing the best I can with what I'm left with after everything I've been going through in my entire life of 43 years. A lot of death. Death has always been a part of my life since I was 6, 7 years old, and my friend Matthew passed away. All the way until now, I just buried my dog. And, it's a tough thing to deal with. But it's something that I've gotten used to, for the past 37 years. And I'm going to do everything I can for the rest of my life, whether it's the next 10 minutes when I leave this planet or the next 40 years. I'm going to do everything I can to advocate for people that feel like they're alone and that nobody else can understand.
So, like, did you have you had demonic attachment from a very early age at 7 years old? Did you actually see and hear demons and spiritual things at that time?
I did. I did. I started seeing shadows, and they were coming from the graveyard that we would walk past to go to our bus stop every morning. And while everybody's either sledding down that hill, because it was like 120 2,442 concrete steps up this hill to our bus stop. We had to walk past this graveyard behind some houses. And I would see, looking out of my windowsill in Holland, I would see shadows coming from there as if they were coming from the graves toward my home. And I would run downstairs 3 flights of steps, and I would look through the adjacent window by our front door, and I would look for them, and there was nothing but like toads, and it was as if the toads were multiplying at our front door. It was the strangest thing, super strange to me. And I also had a demonic entity in my room 16 hours before Michael passed away. And he had 4 hooves. He was burnt. He had burnt like flesh. He had glowing eyes, and he would turn his head back and forth, just looking over me. I pinched myself when I was in the bed. I wet the bed. And I didn't know what to do. And I was terrified. And I slid out the bed and I ran down the hallway and I threw up when I was trying to scream for my mom. And I was throwing up in the hallway, still peeing on myself. And she ran in there and she was like, JR, there's nothing in there, honey. And I slept with her and my dog, Cowboy. And the next morning, the same morning, I took a shower to go to school, and I just kept looking everywhere in the classroom, out the windows of the bus. I didn't want to tell anybody because I didn't want to get made fun of. So I was going to tell Michael about it, and the bus stopped when I was going to tell Michael about, this demon. And he got off the bus. I waved to him, and he died, 2 hours later in his front yard. So I've had attachments. I was incarcerated in 1999 for a jewelry store heist that we attempted after my daughter was born, because I wasn't a reliable man at that point. And everything was okay until I got asked by a chaplain if I wanted to do a program for men that weren't violent offenders. And I had a young gentleman write me a letter once they found out that I was incarcerated if I wanted to join this life learning program for men. It was much nicer. You had better amenities. It was more of a dorm with bunk beds, and you got more free time to play basketball. And it was more of like life learning and skills and fatherhood and GEDs. And when I got transferred to that facility that night, everybody was already in bed. The lights were dim. The corrections officer sat me down and he asked me, do you understand that this is a faith-based, God-based program? And I did not know that. And I questioned it, and I didn't want to do it. And I was fighting it. And especially, there was one bunk available, and it was on the top bunk. And I fear heights more than I fear death. And I just could not get on that bunk. And I told him, I'm not staying here. Send me back to the other facility where it's rugged, where the gangs are yelling all night, and I don't want to be in this faith-based program, sir. And so we're staying the night here. And I got on the bunk, and I prayed about it, and I always prayed when something was wrong. I never prayed or asked thanks when things were going right. So I got on the bunk. People were whispering my name, and I didn't see who they were because I didn't have my contacts or glasses. But there was a lot of people in there that I knew in that dorm. And I got on that bunk, and I lied down on that 3-inch mattress, terrified because of heights. Terrified. I was holding on to the side. There was a man sleeping underneath me I didn't know. And I lied down, and as soon as I put my back to that little mattress, shadows started coming from the wall. And I got up, and shadows started coming from the floor. And I got up, and I got up on my feet, and I'm crunched down so I didn't hit my head on the ceiling. And they pulled me from the bunk, and I was trying to grab the man's legs that was sleeping, and I'm screaming for help. And nobody was waking up. And I'm like, I don't get it. I'm like, help, help. I'm screaming. I'm trying to claw at this his sock. and the shadow started pulling me through the corrections officer's office, but the corrections officer wasn't there and the light was off. And they started dragging me through his office and dragging me through the hallway, and the light was going so much smaller. It was as if they were dragging me to hell. I got up. Nothing ever happened. The corrections officer was still in the office. He was standing up. The light was still on, and he went like this. And I jumped down, and I'm terrified, and I got tears dropping from my eyes. And he closed the door and he said, "Sit down." And he started talking to me about God and evil demons, and that they're around me and they're trying to get me to not attend this program to change my life. They're going to do everything I can to stay away from faith and to stay away from God. And they're going to torment me because I'm weak. When I was on methamphetamine, I also had a spiritual experience with a demonic entity, actually multiple times in people and then in a relative's home. The home is evil. It's still around here in this city. And the land is haunted. So yes, I've had plenty of experiences, feeling attachments. I've also had a amazing uh, awakening spiritual experience at the Grand Canyon when I had a spirit in my room and I welcomed it, and I got photos of it hovering over me, and it was an enlightenment. It was an enlightenment, um, very spiritual experience, and I'm super appreciative of that day. That's also the day that my oldest son was conceived. We know this to be true because it was the only time my wife and I laid together in 2 months because of health issues with her. And then also at that time, because of my addiction, health issues for me. And my white blood cell count was way off. And I was taking pills. And though she was creeped out by the spiritual experience that I had and the photos to prove it, her and I still in that room laid together, and she got pregnant that night. So that was a super, super spiritual experience for me. I have the pictures of the Grand Canyon, and I am just a super spiritual man. I mean, spirituality is my life today. And, I share my testimony. I just left work sharing my testimony with people that feel like they're misunderstood. And that's what I do for a living, 24 hours a day.
So, why do you think you were targeted by demons at such a young age, at 7 years old? They came into your life and started tormenting you, essentially.
There was always like a laughing matter. I was born on Friday the 13th on a full moon back in 1978. Just like this past Friday the 13th, it was a weekend of a full moon as well. And that's when my audiobook was published. It's been pretty cool, man. My publisher published my book in September, Friday the 13th, without me knowing that that was going to happen. And also, my audiobook was just published last Friday the 13th, a few weeks ago. But I don't know. I'm a Libra. I was never looked into anything like that. I know that with the stars and everything that's going on in this universe and time and energy and consciousness and everything else that's going on and portals and native land, I don't know the answer to that. But yes, I was born on Friday the 13th, 1978. Um, Unlucky from birth was going to be the name of my first chapter. But I felt like with the demonic entity in my room and Michael dying 16 hours later, I ended up naming that chapter In 16 Hours. Like those are two huge situations that happened, events that happened in my life, and they happened within 16 hours. My best friend passed away, and I had a demonic entity tormenting me in my room as a 7-year-old child.
When you saw the light, or it had the positive spiritual experience, do you think it was like an angel or something?
So at that moment, I was in the room by myself. It was October 4th, 2008. And I'd gotten in that car accident. And my wife and I got married in April, 3 weeks after the car accident. I got a lot of money for that. So my grandmother, my mother, and my wife, they went out to pick pine cones. We just walked the Grand Canyon. My grandfather went back down to the campground to his trailer. My father was in the lodge, the room next door. I was on the bed, and my birthday's on October 13th. So while we were at the gift shops, my grandparents bought me a picture of Father Time, and it's a drawing of the Grand Canyon with four native uh, men in the clouds, and my entire house is Native American artwork, all the entire thing. And I've meditated through shaman uh, chants, and that's how I get really close to uh, meditation through those chants and being around a fire. And I was reading that the back of that drawing that they got me, and it was framed and it's beautiful, and I still have it. And I was reading that on the bed, and while I was reading that on the bed, I felt chills. Now, mind you, when I was in like my LSD phase for years, I would drop LSD and go to graveyards in Virginia like midnight, 3 o'clock in the morning, looking for spirits and witches. And so I welcomed this spirit, and I didn't see anything with my own eyes. I not once, but I welcomed it because I felt peace. And at that point in my life, Jay, I had no peace. I was tormented. I was in and out of addiction. I was fighting with myself. I still wanted to seek revenge on other humans that testified against me in court. I wanted to seek revenge on people that wanted the best interest in my life, but I didn't want to face that fear. So I just turned that into a resentment. So I was super in the middle of a spiritual war, even while at the Grand Canyon. But going there was the most peaceful experience for me in my life because that's native land, and I respect it so much. While sitting on that bed and reading that, and when I felt those cold chills and my hairs were all over and rising all over, I froze, and I reached over to my nightstand and I ended up grabbing a camera. And we didn't have cell phones in 2008 like we do now, so I had a little 4-inch Kodak camera that you turn it on and the little lens pops out a half an inch, and I start snapping pictures, and I'm talking to it, and I said thank you, and thank you for showing your presence. I feel you're at peace with me. And I scroll through these pictures while I still feel it, and there's nothing. And then there's a light, white light crack in the wall next to the TV. And then I scroll again, and there's orbs everywhere. Now, there's one thing if there's an orb, and you're like a demonologist or you're a ghost hunter, you see one orb, you're like, it's dust. But when you have 7 or 8 and they're all over the place, they're by my clothes and they're by the wall and they're by the mirror. And then I scroll again and there's a cloud over my bed. And then I scroll again and the cloud is now defining itself. And it's not standing as a human, it was hovering sideways over, and it's remarkable. And I was going to put photos in my book, but that was going to cost a lot of money to do so. But I mean, most spiritual experience ever. And I told my wife about it. And she doesn't have that sixth sense like I do, or had any of these events happen in her life at all. But she is a God fearing woman from New Orleans. And so me like being so excited about it, showing my father, running to his room, he'd be like, look what just happened, look what just happened. And him having his own experiences as a child, he was shocked. And then I show my grandparents, and then I start showing everybody in the world. And I've had other times when I was in my methamphetamine addiction. I was a chef at the Ritz Carlton, when I was doing well, and then I had one drink of alcohol, and it all went downhill that night. And I got a DUI, and I gave up on life. I abandoned my pregnant wife, my kids, and I went on a suicide mission. Picked up methamphetamine with my relatives, and that's when it started getting like all evil. It was nothing but evil, and that lasted 2.5 years. I went missing out here in the desert for 2.5 years, 2 years, and then I did the rehab for 6 months. I went to, I was so tormented by evil while on methamphetamine that I needed to get away from humans. And something, Jay, I don't know, something told me to drive towards the mountains in the morning as the sun was coming up and to go to one of my pool customers' houses that I used to clean swimming pools for. They're in their 80s. And I don't know why I'm going there. And they could have called the cops on me. I mean, I'm just showing up at their door at 6 o'clock in the morning. The sun's coming up. I'm 107 pounds. They're used to me, long hair, 160 pounds, healthy, full of life, being a chef at the Ritz Carlton while cleaning swimming pools. And I'm showing up at their door right at the foothills of the mountain. And I ring their doorbell, and she comes to the door tying her robe, and she looked out the window and she started crying. And she knew it was me. She knew it was me. And she opened the door, and I stayed there for quite a while that morning. And while she was getting coffee, and her husband was on a machine, a ventilator. He was at the end of his days, and she was getting coffee, and their dog, which was a big dog, came into the living room, started barking, and freaked me out. But he wasn't barking at me. He was barking around me. He was barking at something behind me. And I turned around, there was nothing there, and she came in, and she wasn't startled. She was so calm and just in her mode. And she was like, "Don't worry about it, honey." She's like, "You have angels all around you." And I just started crying. Like I was at the point of suicide. And I went to this house out of nowhere. I hadn't been there in 2 years since I left the pool company. And I don't know why I went. And then when I was in there, I knew why I went. And she just welcomed me in with open arms. And she started talking about the angels have always been with me. They're around me right now. Her dog has always sensed spirits around me. I cried and I wept. And she asked me about my babies and how's my wife doing and why I look so sick. And I cried the whole time. And I wanted to change. I wanted to change. But something dark just continued to pull me back into that lifestyle. And the people who are around, they were just committing suicide left and right. They were. And we would have conversations about taking our lives. A few days later, they'd be gone. And then I'm back in another mental institution. Just wanting to scream so loud that the whole world could hear me because I was just tormented and I was being stretched beyond my means. So that spirit at the Grand Canyon, I believe truly it was Native American. I was on their land. I appreciated their land. I welcomed that spirit into the room, and I felt so much peace and calmness. I don't know at that point in my life, and I wrote it in my book if I was gonna die soon after, and that's why it was visiting me and showing its presence and sharing that with me, or if it wanted to show me what peace really felt like and to change my life. And the crazy thing is, Jay, it took me 5 more years to change my life after that. That's a long time. That's close to 70 months of me tormenting myself on drugs and going in and out of jails and mental hospitals.
So when you almost died those times, like when you got hit with the flashlight, did you see or experience anything like, good or bad, demonics or anything like that?
I just felt like I was never going to be able to move again. Like I was truly alive and I could think clearly as I can right now, maybe even more clearly than I can think today. But I couldn't function. I just could not function. I couldn't speak. I wasn't looking at myself like I was in the bathtub that day when I was drinking and with my neighbors, our neighbors. When it came to me being beaten with the cinder block and the gun put to my head, or me overdosing on somebody's living room floor on heroin, methamphetamine, and ecstasy, it wasn't any of those experiences like it was when I was in the bathtub from drinking myself almost to death that day.
Hmm. When you got spiritually fit, did you give your life to God or to Christ or something?
I went to the Salvation Army in 2011. I went to a 12-step meeting and I got triggered by it and I walked out. I went back a month later, 4 days later, I walked out. After they released me from the psych hospital again, February 8th, 2013, I went back. They weren't going to let me back. They didn't want to let me back. It took them 21 days for them to call me back to accept me back in their program because I AWOL'd twice. Now, Jay, I tell you, when they released me from the mental hospital that last time, I knew I retired from that lifestyle. I knew I was done. I knew I was done. I knew I was done. And I made it to my parents' house at 34 years old. Again, I was 110, 114 pounds because I was eating at the hospital those weeks. And another spiritual experience happened when I knocked on my parents' door that morning at 2 a.m. I had gone to my parents' house a year before that, and there was a garage sale, and they live in the desert. It's not a huge cookie cutter style neighborhood. The homes are spread apart, but they live in a cul-de-sac, and they're ranch style homes. And there was a garage sale, and I'd been clean. I tried to get clean at that point, and I got baptized at a church, but I went back out as soon as I got cash money, and I went back out and entered the darkness again. But within that week or two that I was clean and I got baptized, and my family was walking on eggshells and hoping that I was going to change my life and go back to being, learning how to be a man. I went to that garage sale and I purchased a bunch of Native American artwork from people in the desert Southwest, and it was authentic. There was one piece that I couldn't afford. This lady that lived there ended up being a DJ at K-Love, which is a Christian radio station here in Tucson. And she said, "You come back and you fix my swimming pool, I'll give you that artwork." Before I relapsed, I went over there and I fixed their swimming pool. I went back out again for another year. That's when I was going to commit suicide. They released me from the psych hospital February 8th, 2013, knocking on my parents' door. My mom opened the door. She said, "I knew you were coming. I felt it." They thought I was going to rehab after the mental institution. When I walked through that door and I looked right before she answered the door, I looked up at the stars and it was clear as night because here in Tucson, there's not a lot of light pollution because the University of Arizona does a lot of work with astronomy. So I'm looking at the stars, I'm talking to God, and I'm like, "Thank you. I know I'm done. I have retired. I'm retiring from the 19-year lifestyle that I lived, and I'm retired." And I felt that presence. My mom opens the door. I go in there, Jay, and that artwork of that native chief, his name is Autumn Shield, that I got from that lady that worked at K-Love, the Christian station, she dropped that painting off that day. That day. And when I opened the door and it's a huge painting. It's framed, it's glassed. She opened the door and I looked right past her and it was on the floor facing me. They got a wonderful Southwestern style home. And I looked right past her and I was like, "When did that get dropped off?" And she was like, our neighbor dropped it off today. 1 year after all that stuff happened, she dropped it off that day. And I knew right then, Jay, I just knew it, the spiritual experience. I looked at that painting and I was like, man, I called the artist. I called the gentleman in his 70s and I said, hey, I got one of your pieces, sir. I was like, what's his name? And he was like, that is Autumn Shield. And it was just perfect for me. I was born in the autumn in October. He's a warrior. He looked like he'd gone to battle and he was just done in battle. And that was me. I stayed at my parents' house for from February 9th, because it was past midnight. So February 9th to March 1st, I stayed with my parents. And I read scripture every morning in their backyard while I smoked my cigarette and I drank my coffee. And it was very spiritual. I heard the hawks in the background. The sunrise is coming over the mountains. Very spiritual. Sitting by their swimming pool, having me time with God. And I read a proverb every morning. And everything I read was just perfectly fit for everything I'd went through in my life with the drugs and the alcohol and these people that were tormented. I went to the rehab. They didn't let me in. I went to the rehab. They didn't let me in. I ended up calling this rehab 4 or 5 times a day. And they were so fed up with me calling. They're like, we told you there's no beds. I was like, I know there's beds. Men are going to relapse. Men are going to get kicked out. I was like, I need to get back in here. March 1st, 2013, Salvation Army opened their doors to me. I went in there. I went in the chapel and I gave my life to Christ.
That's pretty cool.
March 1st, 2013. 13 was my lucky number. That wasn't an omen after all. And guess what my name was on the streets when I was out there? Somebody named me the Omen. So all these things was like, I'm Omen in the street. I'm Joel in the Bible. I'm a Libra. You know, it's a balance between good and evil. I mean, everything just, you can't make this stuff up, man. Unbelievable. I'm just so blessed, Jay, to be 9 years clean and sober and to be where I'm at right now.
So you had an out-of-body experience too, didn't you? You said in the bathtub you actually had an out-of-body experience.
Peaceful. Peaceful.
Did you
Looking at
feel
my
like
naked body. Absolutely. Authentically, honestly, I felt at peace. I was looking at my dead body. I was looking at my dead body naked in the bathtub. My wife came in screaming and crying. She didn't know, but I just like ransacked the house through rage because she started yelling at me in front of our neighbors. And I raged out and started breaking things around the house. And that's when I dropped to the floor. She undressed me, helped me into the bathtub, turned on the cold water, called my parents for an intervention. At that point, my mom almost died from alcoholism at a Pink Floyd concert. So they didn't know what to do, you know, and so she had a near-death experience as well. But it was peace, Jay. It was peace. I was looking at my dead body in the bathtub, and it was super peaceful. When she came in the bathroom and she was yelling on the phone and crying, it's like woke me back up. When she did that, went back to pain. I went back to pain. I was back in the bathtub, naked, hungover already, drunk, alcohol poisoned, and immediately I went back to pain and suffering.
So it's sort of like for several years you sort of had God and Satan almost fighting to get your control, get your life, it sounds like.
And I was aware of it. I was aware of it. I was totally aware of it. I heard of God since I was 5, 6 years old, growing up in Europe. When Michael died and the demon and I was seeing shadows, I prayed to God in my bed at 6 years old, but there was no voice. There was no light shining down on my bed. There was nothing. Nothing. But when we would go to Mexico and I would walk off to the beach by myself and just look at the ocean while the water touched my feet, and I felt a supreme being. I felt that being with the ocean. So the ocean to me, water, gets me closer to God. like just the feeling, the presence. I talk to God all day today. And then fire, going in my backyard here and starting a fire. My sons will come down and they'll argue and fight, and they'll grab marshmallows and do s'mores, and they'll be kids because they're very young. My four boys are. But as soon as they go back in the house and it's peaceful and I'm under the stars and I'm around that crackling fire, I'll turn on my phone, native meditation flute, and I'll put it next to me on our bench, and I'll just lay there. I'll lay down on the bench, look at the stars, and I'll appreciate, nature and the fire and God's presence and my serenity. But I have definitely been stretched beyond my means. The devil rejoiced when I did his work, but God is almighty. And no matter what I go through, because I do struggle still because of the drugs and alcohol and my trauma, I give it to God today. I hand it over to him to fight that battle for me because I can't do it.
So what has the last 9 years been like, being under God's control and being clean and sober?
Remarkable. I'm not going to lie, Jay. I shock myself. I know people out here, they're shocked. I get people going to the facility that I work at today that I was getting high with. 9 years later, I look like a completely different man. I carry myself with a charisma, an energy. I can almost get through to everybody I come in contact with, and they can feel my spirit. People look at me like I'm small, and as humans, we judge. It's just a natural thing that we do since infancy. We judge people. When people are asking for a baby and the baby gets passed over to the uncle or the aunt or the grandparent, the baby starts crying. Why? They're judging that person already. I don't know that person with that beard. Give me back to mama. So even now, when people see me, they're like, what the hell is this guy going to do for me? After they have an hour with me, I could get them to tears and to open up and be vulnerable. Men that just got out of prison for 20 years crying. Like, how did you get through to me? It's this spiritual experience, man. This is what it's all about. At the end of life, this house means nothing. My truck means nothing. I'm here to leave a legacy for my children, but when I'm gone, it's going to the spirit world, and I've tapped into that since I was a kid. Last 9 years, remarkable, remarkable, remarkable. I can't believe it. Still today, what I'm able to do is remarkable. I God's agape love. I just can't explain it. It's remarkable.
Well, have you seen a lot of people turned around because of your testimony, and their lives have been transformed as well?
Every day, every day. And with the flesh, I still have self-doubt. There's still a war going on my head between God and Satan. There's no there. That's not going to go away. It's spirit. It's the righteousness versus the flesh all day long. I have sick thoughts all day long, Jay. I just have restraint because I open my heart to God to give me the strength to do so. I have crazy thoughts all day long. So me going into a room with men, women, children, teenagers, whatever, when I'm able to, and I have a lot of fear speaking in front of people. I truly do. I have anxiety disorder and I have panic attacks. People see me like, man, you're the freaking man. The behind the scenes stuff, it's brutal. I have depression. I'll close myself off for 2 days from the world. And I don't want to be around my wife, my kids, anybody. But that's what the devil wants. He wants me to be away from everybody, to close my curtains and to lay in bed for 2 days so I don't save anybody. But I'll get people reaching out to me 4 years down the road and saying, hey, I got my own business today. I have a wife and I have kids. Remember me? I was going to take my life. And I'm like, no way. That's crazy. I can't believe. I'm like, what the heck? What? I have men that work in my facility that I inspired in 2015 by sharing my testimony, and they're running the place that I'm at. I kind of stepped back. I stepped back because I'm able to tap into my spiritual self and this realm, and I'm able, I'm grateful that I'm able to slow down. I let people know that the only reason why the world is getting faster is because we're allowing the world to get faster. But if we're in our own space, if we're in our own space, we're able to slow everything down. It's called mindfulness. Where we could slow down everything. We could be aware of our thoughts, our breath, our feelings, our 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 symptoms of illness, whatever it is. But we need to be able to slow that space down, space and time. You hear about all this space and time stuff, like it's real. I wasn't into any of this stuff. So people will, I'll preach all day long, like slow your space down. Yes, the world might be getting faster because technology, and you might get confused because the truth is so confusing, and there's more lies being thrown out into the world right now than ever before, and it's going to double by next year. Information doesn't translate into transformation. If information translated into transformation, the whole planet would have transformed already. It's motivation that transforms people. And for me, getting out of my own damn way and giving it over to a supreme being who I like to call Christ today, I'm able to go ahead and break that stuff down with my anxiety, depression, rage. I still have rage. It didn't go away. It got worse because of the chemicals. I just have restraint today. I have restraint, and I'm able to speak for 2 hours in front of a group of people while having doubt walking in the door, while being afraid to open my mouth. And then I need 15, 20 minutes away from humans after I get off stage. And then I'll just stand there and under the sun, and I'll ask God to calm me down. I'll breathe, and on to the next.
So the facility you work at, is it a faith-based facility?
It's not. It is not. There's faith-based facilities here, and I was going to go work for a faith-based facility, and it didn't work out. And I questioned. I was like, God, why, Father, why didn't I, get the job at this faith-based place? And my spiritual guide, who is a God-fearing man, he's a pastor, he said, God didn't want you there, brother. He didn't want you there. There's many reasons he didn't want you there. But I felt like I was trying to force my way into a faith-based program. This is recent. I was trying to force my way to get my way, being selfish, to go work in a faith-based program, because if you're walking in there, you have faith in God. So I'm like, I want to be around people that all believe in God. And it didn't work out. They didn't even call me back. So I questioned it, and I questioned my spiritual guide, and I'm like, what do you think this is all about, man? Like, I'm on fire right now. Like, what is going on? Like, I have this going on. I got this going on. I'm like, what happened? Why wouldn't they want me to come in there when they need the position filled? I had everything they asked for. And he simply said, God didn't want me there. And you know what happened? I struggled for 6 weeks. This is a month and a half ago. I left my job. And this is a season of growth for me. I left my job. I went to a major hospital here in Arizona that is the Reba for Arizona. Runs all behavioral health. Top. And I got a job there. And I didn't like it. And I felt bad because after they trained me, I left. And I went to a different place. And I was there for 3 weeks, Jay. And I didn't like it. The job that I ended up leaving offered me more money to go back, and gave me the exact position for me in this season. So I've been back at my old job that I helped open in 2020. I've been there for 6 weeks now, 8 weeks. And I'm super, actually tomorrow will be 8 weeks that I've been back there. And I couldn't have been happier, man. So just trying to force my way to get what I want. God knows what's necessary. He plays spiritual chess all day long. Even when I think I know what I want, he knows what I need. So everything always works out if I'm humble and I'm patient and I just put my faith in him. But I struggled for 6 weeks, going from job to job to job, being embarrassed. Like that was embarrassing, and it was tough on my wife having different schedules throughout the 6 weeks. Okay, I'm leaving, going to a new job. Well, what's your schedule now? I don't know yet. My kids are like, Dad, are you coming to my basketball game? Are you coming to my baseball game? My other son's like soccer game. It was rough, but I grew from it. I grew from it, and I'm so appreciative today that I was able to sit down with the job that I left to begin with, and we worked some deals out, and I'm exactly where I need to be, even when I didn't know I needed it. So it was cool. It was such a blessing.
Hmm. That sounds like God has you exactly where He wants you.
Amen. Without me even knowing it, it's incredible how we think we know what we want, but it's not. It's not what we need. It's not where God wants us to be, and I'm learning that more so all the time. We could never fathom what's going on. We can't comprehend how amazing life in the universe really is. It's so intriguing, and our brains can't comprehend that type of power. And I'm trying to learn though every day. I'm open to it, and I want to share it with the world. And I wanted to share it through my book. I'm not educated. I didn't graduate high school. I didn't care to graduate high school. I had other intentions. But now, 43 years old, I'm open. I want to become more intellectually stimulated, but the spirit realm is everything to me. That is my first and foremost. That is my go-to. Everything is about the spirit on this journey with me.
So I think you'd mentioned that you like meditation. Does meditation help you kind of slow down and focus on God more?
It does, and it's intriguing on how hard I could try to meditate on something, but when you get into that space at that time, something else pops in front of you, and I'm like, for instance, the eagle. It's my spirit animal. And I'm focusing on it. And I'm focusing on it. Whether it's guided meditation or me doing what I'm doing, something else will jump in front of me and it'll be a white horse. I'm focusing on the eagle. I'm an eagle. I'm soaring. And I'm meditating through the native flute or guided meditation. And all of a sudden it's a white horse in front of me. I'm like, what? What do you mean that's not my spirit animal? So once we get into that place, because meditation is super hard. Like we really, truly, if we don't know how to do it, have somebody guide us. And once we get there, it's intriguing, man. Um, there's so much to the spirit realm and meditation and calmness and just being away from humans and humans' voices. Like to get away from that and to be aware of our breath. To me, this was all corny, Jay. This was all corny to me. I'm too cool for this stuff. Like, whatever. Give me some more dope. I'm gonna go out here and try to get as many chicks as I can, or I'm gonna go steal a car. Just to be in this space and time where I'm at, I have to share it. I have to share it with people. It's remarkable.
So you wrote a book. What is your book called?
The title of my book is The Book of Joel: Cunning, Baffling, and Powerful.
And is it
It
available on
has.
Amazon and different places?
It is. It's actually. I'm handcuffed to a chair, and there's a demonic entity staring at me in front of me, and there's bones of the people that I lost in my life scattered around the street, and there's two tornadoes coming at me and him, and then there's eyes coming from the clouds. Now this is literal, and it's also figurative. From the demonic presence in Europe and Belgium when I was a kid, me being handcuffed to a chair when I'm being questioned by detectives, or being chained to my addiction. And then also I was in I was in Louisiana during Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Rita. And I was also in Virginia during Hurricane Isabel. And I love nasty weather for some reason. I don't know why. And I live in Arizona when it's probably cloudy 20 days a year. But to get off topic, not to get off topic, you can find my book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you Google the Book of Joel, Joel, it's actually biblical, that title. Cunning, baffling, and powerful. You could get it anywhere now. You can get it at Walmart, Target, eBay, and also the Audible is out for those individuals that don't like to read or they can't read anymore because they get headaches or whatever. It's out now on Audible. The Book of Joel. I've been doing some book signings at churches. I've been doing book signings at Barnes and Nobles, uh, universities. I can't believe it, Jay. Like me, this guy. Like I can't believe it, man. I'm shocked. I'm shocking myself, man. Like to look at my body in that bathtub that day and to have so much peace and then to go back into my body when my wife was crying coming into the bathroom, to go back to suffering. I didn't know what I wanted. Thus is why, through my torment, I wanted to take my life. I thought that was going to be the answer. You let me do as much dope and drink as much alcohol as possible and overdose, and I did, but I didn't die. I had a lot of people that were out to get me, whether it was demonic or in people or not. But I'm super grateful that I didn't take my life, suicide by cop, by overdose, or by jumping in front of a moving vehicle in front of that psych hospital. The last 9 years have been nothing short of a miracle. And if you or anybody loves to read a story of redemption, paranormal experiences, addiction, addiction recovery, undiagnosed mental illness and how people deal with that without knowing what's really truly going on, anxiety, depression, PTSD, rage, intermittent explosive disorder, manic depressive, read the book. If you have a addicted loved one who's an alcoholic, and I hear people all the time, Jay, I'm just an alcoholic. I'm not like them. Well, you're going to die a brutal way just drinking alcohol. Like when I hear the word just, you can't justify alcoholism just because it's in the store. No, there's no justifying it. If you can't handle your drinking, you don't need to be drinking. And if you've given everything away of life to alcohol, we don't need to be drinking. But for loved ones, if you want to understand what it's like for us as alcoholics, read this book and you'll see how people that have been chefs, that are lawyers, that run businesses, how they throw everything away for a drink. But once they turn their life and their will over to a higher presence, whether it's God, whether it's a group, whether it's the universe, what have you for you, we can turn our life around. And it's really an intriguing story. Again, I'm not educated as far as high school or college, but I'm such a deep thinker. I have been since I was a toddler. I spent 6 years putting this to my experience to work, and it's changing people's lives. I have 80-year-old people reaching out to me that their 50-year-old son or 60-year-old son went back out to alcoholism, and they saw this book on their dresser, and their 60-year-old son did not pick the book up and read it, but they did, and they saw the cover and they're like, "Ooh, demon! Ooh, man, the Book of Joel! Ooh, how intriguing! That's biblical." And then they open it, and then they read it, and and they call me, and they're like, "God bless you! Like I'm an 80-year-old woman, you don't even know me, but your phone number was in my son's book, and I just want to say God bless you, and you inspired me, 80 years old." So I'm on this path, Jay, and because of my near death experiences, I'm able to appreciate everything.